I'm the chair of the walk. I hate when that happens. Anyway, good morning, everybody. Welcome to workshop number 2, which is on services. My name is Barry Buchanan. I'm chair of the Whatcom County Council and have been fortunate enough to lead this justice project for about the last 5 years. And I'd like to welcome also our planning team for the Justice Project. Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force co-chairs are Stephen Gockley and Jack Hovenier. And we had Deputy Executive Tyler Schroeder and a lot of help from our folks here at Crossroads and our council staff. So we've had a real intense year, and we're here now to really work on implementation. So with that, I will turn it over to Holly, and she will lead us through our process today. So welcome, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Barry. Okay, well, let's pull up our PowerPoint slideshow. I'm really glad to see you all. And actually, we're going to start today with a statement of recognition. So next slide, and Stephen Gockley is going to offer the land acknowledgement. Stephen? Is he here? I didn't even see him. Oh, he's not here yet. Jack, would you be game to do it? It's right on the screen.
Yeah. I have 2 monitors, so I won't be looking at the camera. I'll be looking at the other screen. So sorry about that.
No problem.
Land acknowledgement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present, and please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events.
Okay, that was good. Thank you. Beautifully spoken. Okay, well, let's get started. Glad you're all here. For those of you whom I haven't met, my name is Holly O'Neill, and I'm a facilitator with Crossroads Consulting, and I'll be leading our process today. Barry had introduced the planning team and the support, and one thing we wanted to mention here, and especially for those folks who may not be participating in the meeting itself, but are here as observers, you're welcome at any time to email your thoughts and comments to this email address, which is for the IPRTF task force, and that'll get routed to Marty and myself and the planning team, because it really does help us know what you all are thinking. So please, at any point, if when we get off the call and you're like, oh, I really noticed this, or I wanted to add that into the conversation because I didn't get a chance, then you can go ahead and email. Okay. Next slide. So our agenda today, I'm going to just give a little framing. We'll follow up on our systems work from our meeting last week. And then, as Barry had mentioned, we're going to work on services, which is our next topic. And then we'll close out and adjourn at 11:30. So that's the plan. And thanks, folks. We had to make a little adjustment on our schedule. So thanks for coming early today. Next slide. All right, so I want to just do a very quick overview of how we got to this point for those of you who are joining us. So this is a shortened version of what I said last time if you missed it. So we have just completed a pretty comprehensive needs assessment for the Justice Project. It was based on the VERA report, sequential intercept model. The IPRTF was closely involved in that, and of course had done a lot of the work to get us to this point. The behavioral health gap analysis team did a ton of work, and that work is especially relevant for our conversations today. And then, of course, we had our amazing stakeholder advisory committee, so 38 voting members, very diverse, and really brought together such a beautiful needs assessment. So next slide. We had also a lot of public input during that process, and we will have some in this process as well. So we had an online community survey with over 1,700 people responding, a town hall, 6 listening sessions, and then also in interviews with all sorts of people who might not otherwise have a voice in our process. And then we had surveys of people currently incarcerated in the Whatcom County Jail and people working in the jail. So that all was really important to inform our work as a SAC, Stakeholder Advisory Committee. This is the Justice Project Needs Assessment. It's online. I really recommend you read it. And you'll see that it's constructed as 3 interrelated parts: systems, services, and facilities. Next slide. And at our last meeting, you may recall, there was a discussion of how many acronyms can one person have in one conversation. So I think this is on page, I don't know, like 83 or something. And there are multiple pages of acronyms and glossary terms in the needs assessment. So if it might be good to have that handy. And also Marty is starting to compile the new and additional acronyms we're going to need for the implementation planning. So land of acronyms, that's us. The needs assessment includes background and data, which is really valuable. It's a beautiful compendium, actually. Jennifer Moon was our main report writer and really did a brilliant job. It's got the vision, values, and goals that the SAC really were able to articulate what they held in common and what was important. And then we have 16 needs and 32 recommendations. And it is those 32 recommendations that is the basis for this planning effort we are doing now. Okay, next slide. And our scope of work for this next month is to identify the actions and the projects that are going to advance the recommendations in the needs assessment. And we're looking at, give or take, about a 1 to 3 year time frame. So what can we do to really, put the boots on the ground, if you will? Next slide. This is our schedule of workshops. So you are here on March 17th, and it's really going to go fast. So you can see the schedule of the things we have in front of us. Next slide. And what we're doing is a rolling process. So we gather input with people uploading materials onto the worksheet. We workshop it. We take it a little bit farther with massaging it. We bring it into the conversation at the next meeting, next workshop, and then we start with this one. That was not well described, but basically, we have a lot of content to deal with, and we just have to keep each part of it moving, if that makes sense. So we try and gather, talk about it, and then take it to more refinement as we go. Next slide. So today, we're going to do a step forward on refining the systems, and then we'll begin the conversation on services. And when I say refine systems, here was Marty and I, here was our big aha this week in working on it. As we compiled everything, we really need to identify today who is going to refine the rest of the work, because we've taken it as far as we can. And so we need to figure out who's gonna really nail it down and get it clear. So next slide. What we've done since last week is we've compiled the notes from the workshop discussion and the worksheet input. We've spent time on the telephone and email clarifying information with subject matter experts, and we begin to conceptualize the structure of the implementation plan. So for this section, we've got it kind of roughed in, we've got the details that we have, and now we got to figure out how to fill in the gaps. Next slide. So confirm this is we may be jumping ahead. So our suggestion here is Marty and I are going to offer maybe a possibility, some IPRTF committees that could help with moving these different sections forward, or there might be other ideas you guys can offer, but we do need people with the expertise and commitment to help filling in those gaps, right? Of like, okay, exactly who is going to do the work? What staffing is needed? What's it going to cost? Where is it going to happen? Like, that's our job. We have to fill in those blanks. So that's what we're going to try and figure out. And then there was a suggestion for an additional IPRTF committee to help with the oversight implementation plan that came up in the worksheet. And we thought we should maybe just take a few minutes to talk about it. Okay, next slide. Guidelines for participation. I think you all know this, but you really do need to raise your hand to be recognized to speak. You can either turn on your camera and just do it with your hand on the screen and I'll see you, or it's a little bit easier if you use your raise hand button, and then remember to take your raise hand button down, right? You can avoid repeating ideas and try and stay just focused on what we need to do next as much as possible, or what questions we need to answer. And just remember, all this is going to overlap. So Marty and I are tracking those overlaps between systems, services, and facilities. Next slide. Okay, y'all, are you all with me? Is there anybody who doesn't understand what we're doing? Because what we're doing is we're going to pick up the thread on systems and figure out who's going to fill those little gaps in. Anybody unclear before we have this conversation? Okay, great. So here we go. The A1 section, the competency restoration, which we had fabulous discussion about last week. We've got it partially filled in. The question is, who's going to take the next step? Marty and I are wondering, what do you think, competency restoration work group? Would you be able and willing to fill the pieces in? So anybody, I know, sorry, you're going to get put on the spot here, and you can say, I don't know, or heck no, but that we do need to ask. What do you think? And Tyler, you're muted, but I see your mouth moving.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Michael has a question.
Oh, Michael, go ahead. I don't know why I'm not seeing your hand. Oh, there you are, because I didn't have my screen correct. Go ahead, Michael.
These things necessarily involve an independent branch of government, the judicial branch. And I believe there are representatives of the judicial branch on the IPRT. How is that representation? Is that that kind of cross-branch government personnel or group adequate to a task? I'm just saying that this really involves, we can't just set up a citizen group. It has to be the decision makers and the judiciary have to be involved. Are they already involved in the IPRT? Is that a vehicle or what?
Thanks, great question. I'm going to Barry, your hands up, go ahead.
Thanks, Holly. Trying to fix, yeah, there you go. I just wanted to speak a little to the competency restoration work group. I think they're certainly working on this. It's a bigger task than what they can accomplish on their own, but they're seeking, and we are seeking, I'm on that work group. We're seeking to find some regional partnerships that can expand the conversation. We've already expanded the conversation into the legislature, and they're very much aware of the problem. So it's certainly maybe a tip of the spear, a fine tip of the spear, maybe. I think for us, because we're focused on it, but we need a lot of help. So I guess that would be my comment about the work group. There are judicial members on that work group. We have a judge. We have two judges. We have a district court judge and a superior court judge on that. So that input is there. And I'll let maybe, I see David Freeman is there. He could maybe speak a little bit to the pretrial side of this question. So anyway, that's what I would offer on competency.
Okay. And Tyler, were you going to jump in here?
I was just going to say, I not to volunteer the group, I have participated on that group a little bit. I think it's a very knowledgeable group, and probably the best fit in our community to talk about what's next in competency restoration. So I understand why that would be recommended.
Great, thank you. David?
I was just going to answer Michael's question, which is that Judge Grockmall is on the competency restoration work group. I also am on the pretrial processes work group. So there is judicial representation on both of those groups.
Okay. So I'm hearing, yeah, Perry.
I just wanted to second what Barry and others had said. Certainly willing to step into this, need some guidance, just some clarity as we go along. Very important topic, and just wanting to make sure that that's effectively addressed. We happen to be meeting today. I think that Marty's going to sit in on that this afternoon, the competency restoration work group. And we may be able to even further that clarification and steps. But, you know, as Barry was saying, that, you know, that piece of sort of some of the clarification and, you know, availability of the members and some of those things are, you know, are components. So just wanted to add in that. Thanks.
Great. Tyler?
Yeah, just to follow on what Perry indicated, I think it would be a great idea to have the planning team and the facilitators, right, like Holly and Marty and the planning team, which is myself and Barry and Jack and Stephen Gockley, be able to help facilitate this conversation into those work groups, to really be able to follow up with the work groups and discuss through what type of details we're kind of looking for as next steps. So.
Excellent. And Tyler, you speak my mind, and for Marty too. We're not just going to throw you into the, you know, out without a paddle or a life. We have, you know, we've already created basically the template. We've started to fill it in, and Marty and I can be there to help support the groups in doing the work. So absolutely, it's not like you're going to start cold, because we've got everything we've already worked on too. Yeah, Stephen.
I guess I'm going to ask a procedural question, Holly.
Yeah.
Is what our expectation is here that these groups would take on drafting a section of an implementation plan for the recommendation?
It's based on the template. Yeah. Mhm. So
Okay.
that it's unity. We have to have some sort of a form, or it'll be like all over the map. But
So
yes.
I'll just say that both of these groups on this slide, I'm a participant, more of a peripheral participant. And they are deeply into the details of task-specific kinds of things. So to add on another piece, which is formalizing that into a written plan, is a different kind of ask than what they're involved in. And I don't know, that seems like a complicating factor to me. I understand what we're shooting for here, but everybody involved in these groups is really busy on other stuff and really embedded in fine details of these subject matter issues. So I don't know what our time frame is, would be one factor here in making these assignments or asking about these assignments.
Yeah, thank you. Marty?
Definitely appreciate that, Stephen. So we are working on, we will provide a draft already. We are taking what comes through the worksheets in these workshops and putting it together in a draft. We need vetting, and there are questions that we won't have time to ask in these workshops because the workshops continue to move along. So it's just checking on stuff. Does this make sense? Can you, is there any data about this, or can you fill out any, did we get the pieces right? So it's mostly checking, and we just are seeking those experts who are already talking about this, who are steeped in this material, to help vet it, really. So it's not, you're not writing. You don't need, there won't need to be writing, maybe editing. Oh, and timeline is that we are trying to get all the rough stuff done by mid-April for the focus groups, and the final plan, the final implementation plan, is going to council in early June. So that's our timeline. We have to have it basically done by mid-May to get it all formatted, tidied up, and ready to go to the council.
Great. Thanks, Marty. Barry?
I think too, by having Marty attend these meetings, we get that same benefit we got in the SAC meetings, that there was a one person that was really compiling the notes and putting out those ideas that were discussed in those SAC meetings. And I think she could do the same thing just at today's competency restoration. She'll do a great job of summarizing it and looking at what might be action steps. So I'm encouraged by having Marty help us out as she did in the SAC process would be very beneficial. I think we could achieve it.
Thanks, Barry. I'd love to just be listening in on these discussions and gleaning as much as I can that is relevant for the plan. Thanks so much.
Great. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that in concept, yes, the section that we've got started and that we've discussed as a whole group could go to the competency restoration work group with Marty to help fill in the pieces. If you guys get stuck, let us know and we'll figure out what to do next. So A2 is timely case resolution. Go back, please, Jill. Kathy. So we need to confirm, and I want to make sure we're clear. If this group isn't willing to convene and do this, then what I'd be wondering is who can take it on, because we need somebody who's in the know to take this on, an individual or a couple people, but it needs to go someplace. So timely case resolution, pretrial processes work group of the IPRTF, is that possible? Anybody from that group here? Yeah, Heather?
I'm wondering about that group. It seems to me that three key parts of this silo, or maybe even four, would be public defender, prosecutor, judge, and potentially the jail, somebody from the jail. And I don't know who is in the pretrial processes work group, but for sure, prosecutor, public defender, and judge, I think, should be involved in reviewing what the plan is there.
Yeah, great point. Is anyone here part of the pretrial? David, didn't you say you were part of that a minute ago? Yeah.
Yeah, I am. Maya is also, and I see she just popped up. And I think Dave Graham from the prosecutor's office might be on that work group as well. So I think we do have a representative from each department. That work group is set up, just so everyone is aware. This is some of this, as far as court rules and things of that nature, is a separation of powers issue, and it's set up to advise the judiciary of what steps are appropriate pretrial. So ultimately, most of the recommendations from that work group then go to the judges, and it's either voted on or implemented that way. So
Great. Lisa, you had your hand up there. Did you want to jump in?
Just indicating that I was on the work group as well.
Okay. Lisa, does this seem doable for you guys to take the next step on this?
I mean, I think yes, and maybe similarly, we should just have someone come to take notes. Thanks.
Great. Okay, will do. Can do. Wendy?
Mine is, I don't know that there needs to be someone from the jail there for all of it, but when certain chunks are kind of resolved, or especially if they're talking about changing process, that we get a representative from the jail to review it, simply because there may be other things that these folks aren't aware of that the jail's dealing with. So
Absolutely. And you're bringing up a great point, which is the assumption here is not that you'll have to do it all. You can bring other people in, reach out to other people. We just need people to help move things forward, shepherd it along. Okay, we don't have a lot more time, so let's keep going. 5 more minutes, we're going to make this happen. So A3 is pretrial release and monitoring options in lieu of bail. Pretrial processes work group with support from Caleb and Wendy for this particular conversation. Anyone have a different idea? Or will that in concept work? Hearing nothing, I'm going to assume it will. And again, you'll have Marty's support, as Barry mentioned. I'm going to keep going. So addressing the disproportionate incarceration of BIPOC individuals, there's our understanding is that the index committee may or may not be meeting right now, but we're hoping maybe you could, because there's a couple things. We have a lot to do with data, right? Getting our data situation together. So that was our suggestion for A4. Anybody here from the index committee, and what do you all think of that? Yeah, Caleb?
So I am involved with the index committee. I don't know that it needs to be that level of focus, because the index committee really is looking at all information community wide. And we're talking about people who are in custody. And I particularly can get information about people who are in custody. So I can be a part of that discussion. We also have members from IT who can help pull information. But the question, I think, is more broadly how to address the issues. And I'm not sure that that's the whole scope should be the index. I think that there's a portion of figuring out the information, but it sounds like addressing those needs might need to be a broader conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Heather.
That's exactly what I was going to say. And I was just going to offer that it could be really great to ask people with lived experience to review the implementation plan, in addition to, you know, it's not just about who's in the jail, but how did they get there? So having representatives from law enforcement review as well, because those are the practices we want to be looking at too.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like there's some pieces that Caleb can take on, and this is actually, we flagged this already at our last meeting, but there's multiple interrelated pieces. And in fact, if you pop down, if you would please, 2 slides, Kathy. We're also suggesting that the index committee, because remember all this stuff about data, right? A6 and A7 all have to do with how we're going to move forward the recommendations relative to data, and they are spread throughout the plan. I just want to give you guys a heads up, and that we know also the executive's office is going to be hiring a data analyst, so that'll be helpful. But yeah, the idea is that with the index committee and then others as needed, that's how we'd move these data pieces forward. Yeah, Satpal?
I think the way I read it is that I'm already ready to hire somebody. That's a little process there. I just don't want everybody to think that, oh, county executive was going to hire and then he didn't hire. I just, in the process, I'm getting requests from the prosecuting attorney's office and sheriff and public defender that there is a need for something like this, and I'm taking this proposal to the council. I just want to make it clear, it's not in my prerogative, just go hire a couple of people, but I definitely promoting and fighting for that this is something is needed in our county government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's really important to remember, that this isn't a person we have now, but it's certainly, we're hoping that staff person would be hired and be possible to help us with this. Yeah, Donnell?
Yes, 2 things. If we're going to make a statement about looking at incarceration and the root causes for the BIPOC community, I think we need to specify that we're talking about Whatcom County in general and our legal systems here, because it's a very broad statement. And then also with regard to taking a look at that, what we know is that the majority of the BIPOC people in Whatcom County that are incarcerated are associated oftentimes with tribal affiliations. So therefore, I think that we should have some tribal representation to take a look at that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, great points. Thank you, Donnell. Okay, so I guess the question is there anyone here from the index committee? Granted, this is not, there's a lot of different elements of it, but is there anyone from the index committee who can speak to whether or not this might be possible? to convene the index and work on some of these, filling in, as Marty said, to fill in the blanks with our help? Anybody here? Yeah, Caleb?
I am the chair of the index committee, so I think I can relatively certainly speak for the group. We can convene to address these issues. As I said, though, I don't know that it is going to be reliant on the index committee to come up with the information, because it is 100% purely incarceration numbers, and I can access that without having to wait for a convening of the index committee.
Great. Okay.
So we'll start with you, Caleb, and see where we should go next.
Great. Okay. We need to go back 2 slides, Kathy. So I just wanted to flag, I don't know that we have time to talk about this today because we need to keep moving, but A5, recommendation A5 is related to these conversations, to A4. And in the worksheets, a couple of people had suggested we might want to form or have the IPRTF form an implementation plan oversight subcommittee. And that it's funny because this question or suggestion kind of came up at the SAC meeting too, like who's going to be really overseeing making sure that everything we've talked about happens. So this is one piece that I don't know that we can talk about too much today just because of time, but we wanted to float this idea that had been brought up by a couple of folks and just see if others had maybe any insight or reflections. And Michael, I see your hands up. Do you have a thought on this?
Yeah, thanks, Holly. So I hesitate to create another committee, let alone a subcommittee. It seems to me that the buck stops at the county council's desk and the county executive's desk when it comes to implementation. If it doesn't work its way up there, it's not going to happen. So I question whether or not we should create another layer or sub-layer between all these recommendations and the people who have final authority over it. So maybe Barry could answer that. I mean, it's got to work its way up there, and the faster it gets up there and the more direct the accountability is and the more directly elected leadership can take this as their job, maybe the better.
Thank you. Yeah, Barry?
While I agree certainly with the concept of oversight, I think that was the idea of the IPTRF being kind of the concrete, organization that was going to take this implementation side on. So I think the people that are, on the IPTRF have the ability to provide oversight. I just don't know that we would have time to have a whole new committee formed and educated up and be able to be effective. So I guess that would be another concern I'd have.
Yeah, thank you. Heather?
I love what you just said, Councilmember Lilyquist, about where the accountability lies. And I wonder if there's the value I see out of having a subcommittee with the task force or something like that is it gives a really clear space for citizens to also be involved and helps with transparency at different times. So I just wanted to say I like that piece of it. Doesn't need to be this specific example. I'm open to other options too.
Thanks, Heather. Paul?
I see that I think that placing the responsibility for failures or gaps at the executive's office or council office is great, but how does it rise to that place and holding those two institutions responsible for implementation? Like I see the part of this data gathering or dashboards. That's where these things will get identified. And then somebody studies, and then it rises to, if you leave it to the county executive's office or council's office to find out themselves, I think those links will be weak. I think that they should be strengthened, and I like the mechanism where it is quickly risen to those two institutions. That with this has been noticed or identified, do something. I like that, but making them as oversight, I think that will be weak because they have such wide areas of work. They will not be able to identify, and being political position, they will be blamed more quickly than anybody else because it will become a political issue immediately by different groups. I think it should be identified and those should be approached to do something about it.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, that was really helpful discussion. And so we'll take this back to the next planning team meeting and talk and kind of cogitate on what was said and think about where to go next. So thank you all. And I really want to appreciate, like, these are fairly tedious types of discussions. So thank you for your patience. Like this process stuff, it has to be done. But now we're going to do some more fun stuff. So here we go. We're into part 2. We're going to talk about services. And go back one, please. Oh, are we okay? Marty, this gets turned over to you, I believe. Yeah, ready?
Yeah. Okay, so we're just going to dig in. Here comes the very workshop-y part of the day. And want to make sure that everybody's on the same page with our definition. So what we mean by services is a continuum of behavioral and physical health care, housing, educational and vocational programs, and other social services. We're talking about the full continuum from pre through post incarceration for those at risk or currently involved with the criminal legal system. And the needs assessment had 5 identified top priority needs related to services, and those have 11 corresponding recommendations. And that's what we're going to be working on today. The next slide shows you that what it looks like in the needs assessment report, where it lays those out. You in your packet for this meeting got a handy reference version of this straight out of the needs assessment report. So refer to that whenever you're wondering what a B3 Rec 1 is. Just look there. And the other place to look is on the master worksheet that Kathy sent out, or on your worksheet that you can fill out that we are hoping you will continually reference and fill out. Okay, so to move on here, we are going to start with B1. And all of the B1 recommendations are related to increasing mental health and substance use disorder treatment capacity in the community. So I'm going to talk about them. We're going to talk about them all kind of lumped together here for today's discussion. MH is mental health, SUD is substance use disorder. That's the acronyms there, just they pop up throughout these slides. So the first one, as I said, is about recommendations having to do with adding providers to offer community-based mental health and substance use disorder assessment and services, as well as jail-based assessment and services, and reentry support to ensure that when someone is released from jail to community, there is continuity of services. Moving to the next slide, the notes that were everything that I'm going to be talking about here is what I gleaned from going through the worksheets and your comments on worksheets. So I tried to just put them all together. And the notes in the worksheets mention the importance of training for providers to deal with the complexities of the incarcerated population as a particular group. And several types of facilities were mentioned to house desired services. And we're going to talk more about facilities in the next week, but I'm just creating a catalog of what's coming up related to facilities so that we'll have that handy for next week. Community facilities next week, jail-based facilities the following week. That's how the workshops are scheduled. There was also some mention of data and that it would be good to be able to track a person's journey through the judicial system to the healthcare and behavioral health care systems, and then on to recovery. And we can add that to our previous discussion about data. The next one. So it was very exciting to see in the worksheets reports of many activities underway to address the need for more mental health and substance use disorder professionals. And I made a list here. Probably the most exciting to me was the recent approval of 3 additional behavioral health positions for the jail, thereby doubling the behavioral health providers working there. And these positions have been authorized by council and are now posted by Lifeline Connections. So that's some really great progress. Another position for the jail is a substance use disorder provider to do assessments and placements in community services once people are released. So there's that continuity, trying to get that smooth handoff to community services. And Wendy wrote that all of the local community programs have made the commitment to take offenders being released. That's awesome. There are other wonderful, there's other wonderful work happening that is listed on this slide. On the next one, just wanted to note that there are ongoing conversations that are related to increasing mental health and substance use disorder treatment capacity. And those discussions are here. And it's possible that perhaps maybe some of these are groups that we could turn to also for just reviewing plans, the implementation plans related to this particular set of recommendations, these B1 recommendations. Next slide. This is where we should just here, as much as possible, it will help if we can quantify existing capacity and unmet need for services so we know what we're aiming for in terms of numbers of staff, and when it comes to facilities, how many beds we anticipate will be needed. So one of the first questions that was raised is whether anyone has is there any information about how many more substance use disorder and mental health providers are needed in the community and the jail? I think I'd just like to hear if there's been some, if there's some quantification of that we can get. And if not, is anyone working to address this question? Or is there an existing work group willing to try? And I'm thinking perhaps it might be a group that's been meeting monthly to discuss client coordination. But let me just pause here and just ask that question about numbers.
Yeah.
Hi, Arlene.
Go ahead.
This concerned me from the very beginning of our work in the IPRTF committee meetings, the law and justice systems meetings. We had many reports from the various providers. And every time we had a report, I asked the question, how many more of you do we need? Because we need to know that. I wish that I had kept statistics on it because I didn't do that, but very often it was double. So that is at least a clue. I'm not going to say that that's an exact figure because I didn't keep the numbers, but it always concerned me. And what it told me was how deep the need was.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to the question of how, if it's double, how many do we have now? Too, which is not a number that we, at least Marty and I don't know that number. So yeah, thank you, Harleen. Perry?
There may be a couple of things just for clarification. I would say that that's probably a pretty good number to start with in terms of double, and it's a great question as well, of course. Okay, so how many do we have? I think I could probably collect that information. Some of the challenges are that I think that we're honestly talking about providers that are able to bill Medicaid, because there is a reference to all certified agencies within our county and other counties, you know, in terms of the services, but not all those agencies accept Medicaid funding. And so I think that narrows it down a little bit. And I think I could probably find a number for that if Marty wouldn't mind making a note off to the side just to keep me on track with that. One of the things that I wanted to say as well is that I have continued to make an effort and will continue to make an effort to really inform our community-based behavioral health providers, because a little bit of what's happening is these meetings and other meetings are occurring and we have some representation, but I worry that we don't have enough information going out to our behavioral health, you know, community-based behavioral health providers in some specific way. We happen to have a behavioral health crisis services bi-monthly meeting that the Response Systems Division provides, and I will be sharing this information, you know, during that meeting to inform folks. But maybe that should be a bit more formal, you know, than that process. You know, those specific individuals to communicate to. So I wanted to, you know, to make reference to that. I think that I could definitely collect some numbers. Obviously, we face a workforce challenge in terms of, you know, where are those individuals? And I've continued to offer, you know, my opinion that not only do we need to support our existing SUD and behavioral health providers in general, but need to, for lack of another word, court additional entities that are not currently in our community that do exist within the state. They're licensed, they're certified, they're, you know, so we need additional community-based providers in addition to, I'm using the word too much, additional certified, you know, clinicians and SUD providers. So there's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Perry. That was super helpful. Jack?
Yeah, one of my, the long-term advocacy has been in the substance use area. It's a very difficult question because when you ask how many SUD providers are needed in the community and jail, if we're talking narrowly individuals with degrees that provide a certain type of service, that's very different than a peer-to-peer approach. You know, currently in Whatcom County on any given day, probably 500 to 700 people are attending peer-to-peer support meetings on average. We have a lack of housing as it relates to what you might call peer-to-peer housing, whether that's called an Oxford house or a house for individuals committed to staying abstinent. And for example, that's a great resource for someone coming out of jail if they qualify. So I think part of the question has to become what level of service are you trying to provide? SAMHSA's got some decent stuff on this. They've got some essays on dealing with homelessness and intervening with housing. But I think in part, Marty, to answer the question, you have to decide what services are you trying to provide. And, you know, my own bias would be not to always try to provide the highest level of service. I mean, that'd be great if you could, but it's a lot better to get somebody a bed in a place that's safe. I'd rather have 4 people doing that than 1 person getting really great service. And so I think, and the other issue is when you're dealing with the different entities, some are, you know, I come from a full abstinence-based kind of background, but I get the value of harm reduction. I'd rather have somebody on Suboxone not going downtown doing crazy stuff and staying alive than perhaps meeting a definition that some have of full abstinence. So I think getting some agreement on what does recovery look like, because I think for our purposes, in this setting, I would be an advocate of harm reduction, meaning, you know, if you're an alcoholic creating crazy problems and now you're only smoking weed and being mellow, that's a lot better. I'm not saying that's the ideal, but that's kind of reality. So I think understanding what our goals are also governs what our needs are. Certainly, we've come a heck of a long ways from where we were 15 years ago when we were envisioning a better detox or envisioning some other types of housing. So those would be some of my thoughts. I think we're doing better than we think we are. I would say the greatest need I see is probably better, maybe some more educated peer-to-peer support, help even getting a driver's license, having a place to live, things of that nature to keep people in an infrastructure that allows them to find some respite from addiction and mental health concerns. Thanks.
Thank you. Great. Yeah, Arlene?
Two things. One is I want to support what Jack just said, of the issues that have come through the most strongly in our work for me has been staffing, wait times, and housing. It's absolutely essential to push housing. The staffing issue is a concern, and I want to stress the significance of salaries. Part of the reason that we are not getting the staffing that we need and the hirings we need is because the salaries being offered are unacceptable and impossible to live on. And when that's addressed, we will get more staff coming for these jobs. But that means you have to talk to the providers, because the providers set the salaries as far as I could see. And they don't want to budge. So we need to nudge them and stress the significance of better salaries.
Thank you. Okay, Wendy?
Just to give everybody a snapshot, I just checked on Compass's website, and for Bellingham, they have 17 job openings. So most of those are direct service folks. So gives you an idea of what they're looking for too.
Yeah, that's helpful. Laura?
Yeah, just to echo that, I think agencies are struggling with the idea of recruitment, right? They spend a lot of time thinking about the service provision, and they don't necessarily have a team. Some of the smaller agencies, right? They don't have a recruitment team. And so I wonder if there's a way in which there could be coordination around recruitment into Whatcom County so that each agency is not having to create that for themselves. I also think when we're talking about providers and that shortage, we need to make sure we're addressing the prescriber aspect of it, because that's very different than the clinician or case management workforce shortage. There's also a prescriber concern as well. So that's another number that we could dig into.
You guys are doing a great job of sort of thinking about the scope of what this means, to put numbers on it. And Laura, I appreciate that. So I see Julie and then Barry. Go ahead, Marty. I'm sorry.
Kathy, would you just flip to the next slide, because this has some of the ideas you're mentioning that were in worksheets, but also just to stimulate your thinking some more. Love to keep this conversation going and hear your thoughts about various ideas that are coming up about how to deal with the staffing issue to increase mental health and substance use treatment capacity.
Yeah, these are great. Really feel like they complement what's being offered here.
Mm-hmm.
Julie, do you want to go ahead and speak?
Yes. Hello. Good morning, everyone. I just did want to touch on the piece about providers and setting the wage. to be clear, we fight every day for greater wages. And I think that is an issue. And I do know that as I increase wages, I'm still not getting resumes. I offer signing bonuses. I'm still not getting resumes. We go to recruiters and we try to get people in, and we're still not getting resumes. I think it really is a difficulty that we're seeing. And so, we're doing things like training from within. We're working with colleges and training individuals that are just getting their degrees. Anything that we can do to start to create the workforce again, because I think that that's part of the challenge here. And really look at retention and recruitment in a new way. So definitely everything that we can do.
Julie,
Which
would you introduce
organization are you
yourself?
with?
Would you introduce yourself, Julie, just so other members know? Sorry, Marty, didn't mean to.
Absolutely, I apologize. My name is Julie Grandin. I'm the North Sound Regional Director for Lifeline Connections. So I oversee outpatient and community-based programming for Whatcom and Skagit County, and oversee the behavioral health and reentry services for the Whatcom County Jail.
Fantastic. Julie, and thank you all. If you're not already part of the IPRTF, it does help if you introduce yourself, because yeah, then we'll know who's speaking. All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left on this conversation, 10:15. And what we also need to think about who's going to take this a step forward. And Marty had made a suggestion earlier on that. And I'd love to hear from folks also who haven't yet spoken. So we'll hear from Barry and Michael, and then I'd love to pick up anybody else who might want to throw in some thoughts, and then we'll see where it's going to go next. So
I just wanted to speak to something we discovered while we were on our trip to Nashville, and that is what they call their mental health cooperative. And it's a co-op that's they've expanded it now regionally. They cover both Davidson County that we were in, and down in Shelby County where Memphis is. They're beginning to implement that down there. So Melora and I talked about how we could frame that discussion and maybe approach the North Sound Behavioral Health Organization into looking at that, what that might look like. We're still researching kind of how they did it, and the history of that organization and how they put it together. But they had some fabulous resources there, fabulous facilities. And we were just very interested in diving into that a little more. Don't have a lot of details on it now, but it's something that I think is worth taking a hard look at, and to see if it could benefit even our 5-county region. So just a thought.
Wow, fantastic. That sounds really promising. Okay. So Michael, yeah, and Miley COB after Michael.
So my understanding of this is pretty superficial, but I believe at the state level, the Department of Commerce looks at the various demands for professions statewide level. They do economic and demographic, and they figure out we need more, respiratory therapists or whatever it is. And that then at the state level, they start pushing down through the vocational colleges, the creation of more programs, the pipeline. So if we're not having someone with a resume, let's go upstream. Let's look at the training programs, make them wider, easier, more attractive, more ubiquitous. Does anyone know better than I do with regard to the Department of Commerce and whether or not they have already identified, or who do we talk to about identifying it as a state level vocational need and therefore a state level educational emphasis?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Good points. Lisa?
This sort of fits with what Barry was describing as a larger mental health cooperative that existed in Nashville, where we have just been. What I learned in exploring the mental health sentencing alternatives and how we can use those for our clients in the jail to try to get them out and avoid prison sentences, I learned that mental health assessments that are done by a particular agency are not transferable to other mental health agencies, and this creates a huge obstacle. There's no universal assessment, and so with our folks who are in custody who aren't linked to behavioral community behavioral health agencies, they can't get assessments. If we can get one, it can't be translated to anyone else. So there's this huge breakdown in communication that I don't know if that's been identified anywhere here, but that I wanted to point it out. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. David?
Just to answer Michael's question, 10 years as a administrative law judge for employment security department and workforce development, as well as the work source would be a good starting point when it comes to demand occupations and facilitating kind of the connection between training and demand and decline occupations. So.
Great, thank you. Rebecca?
Yeah, I was just gonna offer some local experience and trying to recruit for a tough profession. I started this year with some bleak outlooks on recruiting for police officers, and we're turning that around. And I think the smartest thing I did was have one of my recruiters had a side business of real estate sales almost. So he basically looked at other cities across the country. Where is a similar cost of living? And what are those officers making? And particularly places that offer the same sort of environmental aspects, like the outdoor recreation options that we have here. We live in a beautiful part of the country and a beautiful part of the state, and that's a very big sales pitch. And you can do this job anywhere else, but the reason you do it here is because of the time you can spend on your time off. And also, we were looking at agencies where they pay a lot less and offer the same cost of living. So like, hey, you can have everything you have at home, but we're going to pay you more. And I don't know if that translates to the mental health world, but I know that's been pretty successful here in the police world. So I just wanted to offer that as well.
That's great. Yeah, we are a beautiful place to live. We got to take advantage of our assets. Yeah, Tyler.
Just kind of going back a little bit to B1 and just that recognition of community-based and jail-based. When I looked at it, I thought it may be helpful for us to really consider those connected yet separately in this implementation plan. It's just such a broad discussion if we talk about community-based behavioral health services, and at the same time, the jail-based behavioral health services. And I really want to make sure we provide enough effort and input onto both of them, because they're considerably lacking in our jail-based facility. And it is a very hard task to solve in the community-based. And so just as we continue with the implementation plan, I think trying to understand how they're connected, but trying to help understand and provide just as much input into both of them will be helpful for this group. And then my other just idea about where to find some information, and I'm sure Perry is aware of this, Perry Mowry, but the North Sound BHO's needs assessment talks a little bit about bed space right in the community, and it has an inventory of providers in the community. So that's a piece of information, Holly and Marty, that I think we should go to really inform the conversation.
Excellent. Great points, Tyler. Thank you. And great. Hi, Lacey. Yes.
Hi, I'm Lacey. I'm Special Programs Manager with the Response Systems Division. I'm also a nurse practitioner. So as Melora alluded to earlier, the prescriber issue is one that I often deal with, and I'm called on to do bridge medications for people as they're waiting to get into mental health services. A place that I've seen a real gap in this community is the early assessment of, so first break with a schizo disorder. We don't tend to capture those folks and provide them the adequate services that they need to. We know that the data supports that if we can intervene early in that first or second break, in that first year or two of a schizo disorder, we can really change the trajectory for that person. And I've really seen time after time, those folks just fall through the cracks. In other communities, they have early assessment programs that find those people earlier and provide a different kind of services because they're youth. It's usually 18 to 25 years old, usually male. And so if we can intervene earlier with youth directed approach for those folks, we can see better outcomes, and I just have seen quite a few of those folks not work well in our current PACT model, and also, you know, struggle with the mental health court and things like that. So just a suggestion.
Fantastic, really helpful. Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, thank you. Mike Hilly, EMS manager of no Behavioral Health Committee. And I want to offer here too, we've talked in the committee several times about, you know, employment, attracting employment, finding the right people to do the work, especially at the engagement level out of the community systems. And so I think there's some opportunity to develop the training and design something for our community, something around that community health worker type of program. Two experiences that I can relate to, one up in Alaska, where some of these remote communities have super hard times finding any type of healthcare, able to go in and train local people. A lot of times they were EMTs or medical assistants to provide the eyes and ears of the public health system from that small community into the larger system. So I think there'll be opportunity to find ground level, maybe entry level people that are getting into their healthcare careers and design some curriculum such as that community health worker that would put people on the streets. And you can have a senior leadership program manager, someone like Lacey McCauley, a nurse practitioner who could manage 3 or 4 or 5 people out there in this community outreach and tighten these programs up. So I won't beleaguer that, but I think there's some great opportunities. Another great example was the Swinomish tribal community who are having challenges getting dental care in their community. So they took their local people and trained them to do that work, and is super successful for increased access to healthcare in that community. So I think we can do something similar here. We just have to be well thought out in the training and obviously approved by local health.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Laura?
Just really quickly, I would encourage us to connect with Whatcom Community College. They're starting a Bachelor's of Social Work program that starts this fall. There will be 12 in each cohort, so small classes. But they also have their SUDP program. And I think there is an opportunity there to, you know, how do we not only have those students intern with our programs, but how are we doing everything we can to ensure that they have jobs when they graduate?
Nice, yeah. Is there anybody who hasn't yet gotten a chance to speak who would like to chime in at this point? Okay, so I think we've gotten really both a lot of creativity in this discussion and a lot of a sense of what the breadth is. And so what I'd like to do right now, so to help facilitate the progress, Marty and I will take all this and put it into shape, you know, like starting to create the content. And what we need is and we have both Perry offering to get some information, and Barry, you offered to bring that model of the cooperative that you got from Nashville. The question is, who's going to kind of dog this one forward? Who's going to help pull this forward? So is it a group like what was the group that was meeting monthly, or are there a couple of individuals? But we need somebody to help carry the water forward. So who would be that person or group for this one?
Is the group Tommy and Perry mentioned on worksheets that's meeting monthly, that has representatives from different the different programs and talking about case coordination? Is that a group that might be able to, that we might be able to touch base with? And just
I can speak a little bit to that. Tommy McAuliffe, program supervisor for Whatcom County's LEAD program. I think when we're thinking of that specific group, it's much more operational based. Correct me if I'm wrong, Perry, but there may be a better group for that specific topic.
Perry Mowry, supervisor with Response Systems Division, I would tend to agree. And honestly, right now, this group, it's fantastic that this group is meeting, and we're really trying to take a look at the nuts and bolts of how the system is working or not working, more accurately, so that we can sort of bring that together. And that just really, in my opinion, needs to be the focus of that group at this point in time, to sort of maximize the resources. You mentioned the the additional staff that are coming in for the jail behavioral health program, and we just really need to make sure that that's nailed down in terms of communication protocol procedures, and that would be a priority for, and it's a little tough to guess the time frame, so don't want to not volunteer, but also
That's okay.
prioritizing.
That's okay. If there are any people in this group, maybe there's Lacey or Melora or anybody who has the kind of perspective, Arlene has perspective on the providers issues that we've been talking about, just let us know. Arlene and Kayla and Tom.
Yeah, I'm willing to work on this, of course.
Thank you, Arlene.
Fantastic. Great. Yeah, Kayla?
Yeah, I had stepped away for a second, so I didn't know if you were talking about just one of these bullet points or all of them, but as it relates to the Medicaid waiver, that's something that I could coordinate with the health department on, just sort of getting that one in process and starting to have those conversations at the state level.
Love that. Thank you, Kayla. And
Thomas?
Hi, yeah, I'm Tom Wynn. I'm the Recovery Courts Coordinator in Superior Court. I'd be happy to be a part of that work group. Prior to this position, I've been a hiring manager in said agencies and experienced all kinds of issues we've been talking about here. So I would appreciate being a part of that group.
that's wonderful. Well, I don't know if we'll come together as a group or just send you stuff individually, but it's just really good to have people who are very well informed to look it over. So thank you so much. Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. I would say I don't know about the entire group idea, but I definitely have a unique interest in this SUD treatment following emergency services. And I, not to throw you under the bus there, Lacey, but we've been involved in that conversation pretty thick the last couple of 3 weeks. And so I would definitely like to provide some input on that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, Tyler?
Yeah, I was just going to recognize that I thought the input that was in the worksheet was really, really valuable. I thought it was a really good level of detail, and it really kind of hit specific recommendations on this pretty complex situation as it relates to services. So I think a lot of the work can be gleaned from that worksheet. And then I do think that following up is a great idea. And then I just want to kind of recognize that from going to Nashville, Tennessee, it's a great example to look to in this conversation. So I will kind of raise my hand and volunteer to help kind of connect some of those dots between what we're talking about on these worksheets and what the group in Nashville saw kind of in reality from across the spectrum behavioral health care, both inside and outside of the correctional facility.
That's fantastic. And what the timing of you all going to Nashville right now, that just that's really fortunate. Yeah, Barry.
Unmute. There we go. I'd be happy to work with Tyler on that. We're going to be over the next week or so going to be consolidating all of our notes that we acquired during the trip. There was 11 of us. So we're going to, get together, huddle, and do a debrief, and then we'll probably have some more information to pass along. But I'd be happy to be part of that group as well, working with that, some implementation work there.
Wonderful. And I agree with you, Tyler, that the input on the worksheets was very rich. And as you can see from these, what we have on these slides, there's a lot of ideas that came forward. And just massaging them into an implementation plan and seeing which ones rise to the top, I guess, is the next step. So I'm so glad that y'all are who have stepped forward are can help with that. Lacey, are you?
I'd be happy to participate in that conversation.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, Melora?
And I would just say Dean White, who many of you have worked with, is still connected with the Response Systems Division. He's also willing to help with that effort, and I am as well.
Oh, that's great. I would love to reach out to Dean. Okay. And thank you as well, Melora. How about if we move on to B2 and B3, which we're going to look at together. So the B2 is talking about ensuring stable funding to expand programs that are proven effective programs to divert people from incarceration. And here we're referring to programs like GRACE and LEAD and Mental Health Court and Recovery Court. As we discussed last week, these may not technically be diversion programs, but they are intended to keep people out of jail. And so we want to just look at these now. And there were a couple of suggestions that were made on the worksheet for just ensuring funding. So that's ongoing local funding commitments with assistance from the state for funding these model programs. And then continuing to mine federal and state initiatives for funding for targeted populations. Are there more thoughts on funding sources before we just move into the next piece here on B2? Okay, let's just jump to the next slide then, and you know, raise your hand whenever.
Yes,
Marty, I think you already know this, but the only other, component to that would be the Behavioral Health Administrative Services Organization, particularly, in relation to oftentimes crisis-related services really coincide with, honestly, diversion of individuals from involvement in the legal or judicial system. So I guess again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but because I know that you know that, but I wanted to make reference to that as a resource as well. And I think somebody we need to continue to have, discussions with regarding available funding.
Yes, thanks, Perry. And this slide just presents some other implementation suggestions that were included on worksheets. And they weren't so much about increasing stable funding, but the desire to expand the capacity of these programs.
Perfect. Doug, did you have a thought here?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this list, and I think everybody knows that the Sheriff's Office has a behavioral health deputy program that we certainly want to expand. And here in the near future, we'll be partnering with some behavioral health specialists with that co-responder model, which is really the intention is to be that pre-arrest intervention where we can actually respond in coordination, arrive at the same time, and provide services where people are in the community, and hopefully do that before they get to a point where incarceration is an option. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Excellent. Great.
Thank you, Doug.
So Marty, what do you want feedback on this
I
slide?
think we'll just move on to the next one. I'm going to talk about B2 and B3 together. So let's just keep going through B2 here. The notes in the worksheets mentioned the essential topics that keep coming up of funding and staffing, and then program coordination for expanding program capacity. And there was also mention of tracking data to see what happened to graduates of the mental health court and others diverted from incarceration. So for example, if programs measured a reduction in numbers of overdoses post-incarceration, or the numbers of people who met a defined milestone in the treatment process, such as like maintaining sobriety for a certain period of time. That would say a lot about the efficacy of these programs. And I know there's a lot of evaluation going on of LEAD and GRACE, for example, of the response division programs. I think that that's wonderful, and maybe anytime there are updates, that's material for the data dashboard project. We have, the A6, A7 data systems and data dashboard, and just trying to continue to hold up those numbers and see what's happening. It seems like pretty essential part of being able to then make the case for expanding those programs. I'm sure I'm not saying anything you don't already know. Mike, did you want to add?
Yeah, thank you, Marty, again. Mike Killey, EMS manager. I do want to, and I promise I won't muddy the waters because we're talking about, diversion from jail. However, EMS does respond to a large amount of mental health calls out there for people that aren't necessarily heading to jail, but they need the same type of help. So absolutely on board about law enforcement getting this going, but at some point EMS wants a chunk of this because we have just as big of an overwhelming problem with the mental health and SUD out in the field, where we're looking for diversion and better options as well. But and I know that's I know that's the underlying spirit here, but I just, as an EMS manager, I just have to get that tidbit in, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely, because that's the prevention end of things, of the continuum. It's essential. And also, of course, the post-incarceration phase as well. If we don't want people just cycling back into crisis. So Melora.
I would just echo what Mike said. Alternative response is needed for fire response as well. We're starting that with law enforcement, but we're missing that with fire and EMS. I also just want to say around communication, again, this will be in our notes, but one of the things we learned in Nashville is one of their reentry tools is a platform called Basecamp. They have 300 providers that are on basically an email referral system, and any one of the providers can send an email or a request that says, does anyone have X, Y, and Z? And then that whole group of 300 is able to respond, and everyone is able to see those communications. So although our Gelada system is meant for providers to be able to communicate about enrolled individuals in our programs, we don't have a general platform. And so that's one of the things we'll be looking at. I do not know the cost. They added me to their system so that I can see it. So I'd be happy to show anyone that wants to take a look at it.
Excellent. Hey, Bruce, I saw your hand up for a minute. Did you want to jump into the conversation?
Nope, that was an accident.
Okay. Okay, anybody else on this? Okay, Marty, you want to?
Yeah, let's move to the next one, which is B3. So we were just talking about B2, expanding successful programs to divert people from incarceration. And B3 is about PACT specifically, which is another effective program. So we're kind of lumping these together. So PACT, or the Program for Assertive Community Treatment, provides evidence-based, recovery-oriented mental health service for individuals with severe and persistent mental illnesses, and often with co-occurring substance use disorder. So these folks are at high risk for involvement with the criminal legal system. The PACT program is provided by Lake Whatcom Center, and they use a multidisciplinary team of professionals to provide intensive services to individuals who are experiencing difficulties with daily functioning because of all they have going on. So this slide has 3 suggestions from the worksheets about expanding the capacity of PACT services. And of course, the first one is staffing, which is not a surprise. Melora, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So we have 2 PACT programs in Whatcom County. Lake Whatcom has been operating a half PACT for quite some time. So it's maxed out at 50 individuals, and they are usually full. Lifeline Connections started a new PAC program, which is a full PAC program, and Julie Grindon is on the call. Julie, if I get any of this wrong, but when you start a new PAC program, you're only able to add 4 new clients per month. So they started this over a year ago, and I believe they're somewhere in the 30s. We'll eventually get up to 100 individuals in that program, but it is a very specific thing, and we're really grateful that Lifeline was able to start a new program.
And that's wonderful. And can you just, or you or Julie, clarify the difference between half packed and full pack?
Yeah, just the only difference is the number. So Lake Whatcom is limited at 50, and once Lifeline is at full capacity, they could have 100 clients enrolled.
Got it. Good. And Julie, do you want to add any information about PACT or your needs related to expanding the capacity of PACT?
Sorry, my mute button didn't want to work. Absolutely. Really what's holding us back are mental health professionals at this time. We have case management, we have peer support. We are following the PACT sanction guidelines. And like I said, just it's mental health capacity at this point.
So getting enough providers.
That is correct.
All right, so we're back to that tune. Okay. Michael, were you gonna?
Yeah, we are back to the numbers game. So I'm going to ask the same numbers question. Julie, how many mental health professionals do you need? And then community-wide, if we filled all 150 slots, does that take up all the individuals who qualify and can benefit from PACT program? How big is the need?
How big is the need is different than the second part of your question. Could you ask that again for me, please?
I guess there's two numerical needs. One is how many providers, mental health providers, do you need to fill out the rest of your program? And then separate from that is countywide, given the maximum of 150 slots, how far is that from the community-wide need? Or when both programs are up and running, and if they have staff to run near capacity, is that enough, right?
Okay, so I need to have 2 more mental health professionals to fill my mental health professional team for my full PAC team. And so for 150, we need approximately 4 to 6 mental health professionals. It's beneficial to have 7 to 8 for a full 1.5 PAC teams, but that is not enough for our county. If I had to guess based on the numbers that I see in the jail and in the community, I would have to say that we could benefit from 2.5 to 3 full PAC teams, to be perfectly honest. And if I might add, it would be beneficial for us to have a specific PAC team that would be for that transitional age, where we're looking at like the 18 to 23 age.
Thank you for your insight.
That was really helpful. And I see Lacey nodding her head vigorously. Great. Stephen, you're up.
Thank you. The PAC program was maybe the only one, certainly one of the very few specific program models that was called out in the SAC discussions. And I will admit to being one of the people who probably doesn't understand what that really entails, other than a lot of wraparound services. But I'm riffing a little bit off Lacey's comment earlier and and Julie's comment that it works better for some populations and not so well for others. So I'm just wondering if maybe this is an offline conversation for me to understand that better, but we've targeted something that is getting a lot of emphasis, but I don't quite understand how it fits in the whole picture of what we're talking about. I just raised that question either for now or for later.
Thank you.
This is Julie. Forgive me. Are you asking why a PAC team is successful or what populations it works best with?
Yes.
Absolutely. So our PAC team is actually for non-traditional services. So it works with individuals where traditional services are not always beneficial. So the individual that, because of their psychoses or their diagnoses, have difficulty walking into an office or need so many services that it behooves us to have a team instead of trying to piece it together through care coordination. So the other piece is, because we are fidelity reviewed, we have certain things that we have to follow through with. And one of the main things is that it has to be an Axis 1 diagnosis. So schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar 1 with psychotic features, and it does not work well with personality disorders. And so we generally, unless it is extremely mild, have to reject or deny personality disorders with this. And so that would be one of the main issues with the PAC team. One of the reasons, again, it's so successful is because of that wraparound model. We don't have to piece anything together. It's all right there. If I need to talk to a substance use professional, all I have to do is pick up the phone or walk into the next office or look to my team member. We have daily team meetings where we talk about every single client within a 45-minute radius and then break off into teams of 3. So every team member has approximately 10 to 15 individuals that they look after and make sure are being followed. And they're seen 2 to 3 times a week at a minimum. And that's what makes it successful, at least in my mind.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Julie. I do notice that loops us back to the assessment bottleneck that was mentioned earlier, and the lack of transferability from agency to agency. I don't know how that plays into PACT services as well.
I'm not sure.
Okay, anybody have a thought on that question? Okay, let's move on, Melora, and then Tyler.
I have 2 points, and thanks, Julie, for that. The first is that the Housing First model and the permanent supportive housing model, which was built out of Pathways to Housing from East Coast and DSC out of Seattle, that always involved a PACT program inside of PSH programs. So when we talk about our permanent supportive housing, we have never had that piece of the pie to make those types of housing programs possible. So what you just heard about, that multidisciplinary team where medical is there, where SUD is there, there's peers, right? That was always meant to be what PSH would be. So I think it's really important for this group to understand that. And I think there's a deep connection between the needs assessment recommendations around housing and then that type of level of support. And then just a quick clarification, and Dean White is helping me with this on great reminder that the Whatcom Resource Information Collaborative, which is called the RIC, they're hoping to have the capacity within that platform to do what Basecamp is doing in Nashville, that referral and request system. So just, we can put a note in there on that.
Fantastic, thank you. Tyler?
I was going to ask about the facilities, about where the PACT programs kind of work best, and Melora kind of really hit that on the head, referring to the PSHs, which is what, Melora?
So permanent supportive housing.
The
So
permanent
PSH
supportive
programs and PAC programs are in the field. So, and Julie can speak to this more, but people don't have to go to a clinic. It's all outreach based. So everyone gets seen 7 days a week. Yeah, and Julie has more information than that than me. So.
And then my other question, and is how are PACs funded today?
That's a very good question. So first of all, yes, we are in the field, and we also have offices. So if they do feel comfortable to come into the office, that's fantastic. We will be able to provide that setting for them, or we can help them along to see their provider. So for instance, if they do feel comfortable seeing a mental health professional in an office, we will bring them to them with case management. Nursing goes out into the field with them, all of those pieces. The second thing I believe you asked is how they're funded. In the beginning, a PAC team is funded with what's called ramp up funding. And you can look at this online. And then after that, it's approximately 1.5 to 2 years. Then it goes through with what the MCOs provide us. And so it's fee for service, and it can also be per customer as well, or per client as well. So it could be that, just for example, we could receive a certain amount of money per client, or it could be a percentage of what they would normally pay us per client. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You know, this is, it seems like an important moment too, because we're starting to talk about facilities, and our workshop next week is on facilities for community-based services. And so if people can start uploading ideas for what kind of capacity do we need facilities wise, sooner rather than later, that really helps Marty and I put stuff together for our next conversation. And we're really flagging a bunch of things right here today. So yeah, it's a perfect setup. Okay, anything else, Marty? Can we bring us back maybe to the slideshow and
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about one particular implementation suggestion that was on a worksheet, which said to create a dedicated PAC team to provide reentry services, links to housing resources, prescriber, behavioral health services. Is that needed? Does it exist already, or is that a new thing that would be needed? What do you think?
Yeah, Laura?
I would just say the goal is for people to be in PACT and then stay in PACT, right? So we want people to be in that program maybe for their entire life, which is why the question of when are we going to meet capacity? It's not like people get into PACT and then they stabilize and move on. Often they need to be in that program to thrive for the rest of their life. And that's always the goal. So if we had a reentry team, that would fill up really fast and we wouldn't be able to address the people coming out. So I think there should be a strong connection, but that the reentry services is really where the link is, to make sure that there's that coordination and warm handoff, and that that's robust. So the services outside of the jail, those connection services are happening as people release, and that then there's quite a bit of time where that team can work with someone to get them into the right program.
So would the handoff be from the reentry coordinator in the jail directly to a PACT program? For those who no, there would be this, they would have to pass through some other services to then enter PACT.
I think to Maya's point, that if we had like a universal assessment, someone who is in the jail could have that assessment. We could be, it takes a while for someone to get into a program like PACT. It's not overnight. And so that sort of reentry / case management support is needed both inside the facility and outside. And with the goal of connecting not just to behavioral health, but, if someone is wanting to go to treatment, if they need medical, if housing, right, really looking at that whole person.
Yeah.
Arlene?
I think the best way to understand this point that we're talking about is to remember that we've closed up all the long-term mental hospitals that we had for many years, and many people in this population would have been permanently hospitalized because of their inabilities to cope with life on various ways. Hence, the reason for all this service and the intensity of the service. This is the same population, so that's why the intensity of care is needed.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So Marty, before we move on, is there anything else on B2 and B3 that you feel like we need to drill into?
I'm ready if others are.
Well, I guess I'm just wondering, should we kind of confirm who can work on this with us in between on the B2 and B3? I'm getting a sense of the players, but would that be helpful, right, Randy?
Yeah, sure. I was kind of hoping for Julie and as one of our people we could turn to with some questions about PAC. Is that okay, Julie?
I would love to. Absolutely.
All right.
Anybody else?
Marty, I think it'd be good to include like Whatcom Center as well as they run the half pact.
Yeah. Is there a contact that, is that,
Yeah, I'm happy to get you a contact.
And maybe Melora, we can also turn to you.
Yeah,
first.
absolutely. Sure, absolutely.
Okay, anybody else inclined to work on this? All righty. So much to do, so much fun. Let's keep going. Here we go.
so if you just go to the next one, Kathy, to 38, thank you. So both B4 and B5 have to do with hiring additional jail staff. B4 is about maintaining qualified, racially, ethnically diverse jail staff. And B5 is about having additional jail staff in order to escort incarcerated individuals to services they need, whether that's in or out of the jail. That takes a lot, people and coordination. So thought we'd talk about these together. And if you go to the next slide, there are a few implementation suggestions that came off worksheets. So in order to maintain a high level of racial and ethnic diversity of jail staff, that would involve recruitment practices, respect for cultural practices, and actively promoting a workplace free from harassment and discrimination. Then there's training on diversity, equity, inclusion, unconscious bias, fair and impartial policing, and then offering wages commensurate with expertise. So, so just to summarize this, these couple of recommendations are specifically about staffing again. And we come back to strategies for how to recruit people into these positions. I'm wondering, I don't want to put you on the spot if I'm not sure if you're still on the call, but Melissa Keeley noted on the worksheet that there were some recent bargaining results. Are you here, Melissa? Let's see. I did see you before.
Yeah, she's here. Go ahead, Melissa.
I'm here.
Would you like to talk about that? What you know about what bargaining is trying to get in terms of new agreements for?
Sure, absolutely. Melissa Keeley, HR manager. Really happy to be able to come to this meeting and share that we've had some very productive bargaining with our corrections group that's resulted in a recent tentative agreement. That tentative agreement will cover the next 3 years, 23, 24, and 25, and provides a continuation of some very competitive wages. Also very comprehensive benefits, including full family medical coverage for our staff and their employees. It also includes a retention bonus that will be spread out over the course of the term of the contract. So for every year that a corrections deputy stays with us, they'll receive a $2,000 bonus at the end of each of those years. We've also added the addition of some additional premiums to recognize folks who come to us with higher education. Our corrections deputy positions are entry level, so a college degree is not required. But with this agreement, in an effort to recruit those folks who do have that higher education, we're offering a premium to those folks who come to us with that. In addition, we're recognizing our employees who provide bilingual services in the jail and providing a bilingual premium to those folks as well. So the agreement is out to vote with the membership right now. We're hoping for a good outcome on that, and that agreement should be going to council in April.
Well, that is happy news, and hopefully that will go through. Before we open this up for more discussion about strategies, let's just go to the next slide, which is about data again. And a couple of suggestions came out to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of past recruitment and retention efforts. And that exit interviews with people leaving employment at the jail and those who were offered a job but declined might be provide good insight as well for helping to refine recruitment strategies. So I think we just want to hear if you have any other thoughts about actions to take for addressing these the two recommendations that are about increasing jail staff, especially the racially and ethnically diverse jail staff.
Aileen, I think, was first, and then Wendy.
I just wanted to make the comment that we have incredible jail staff now. I'd love to retain the ones that we have. I don't go in there every day, and thank goodness, because I don't think I would stay sane. Having to go into work on a daily basis and be cussed at and the name calling and the things that you get people throw stuff at you, and you know, it's a depressing environment. And to go in every day and work like that and not be able to leave, it's not surprising to me that deputies that start at the jail want to leave and go to the road, because at least when you arrest somebody, you drop them off at the jail and you walk away. So they earn every dollar that they get. They earn the pensions, they earn the benefits, and the more we could do to retain good jail staff, I'm all for it. And it's not just because I love certain people that work there. I think they all do an incredible job, and I just want to give a shout out to them and let you guys know that we really do have to make sure these people are compensated. We're looking at trying to get a new facility so that they're in a safer environment, but we also need to make sure that the ones that are currently working in the environment stay so that they can transition to a new environment, which may not happen right away. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Wendy?
Just real quickly, we do conduct exit interviews with people leaving employment at the jail. And related to that, when we interview for folks to come to work as corrections deputies, approximately 90 to 93.5% say they want to go to patrol. So they see the jail as an entry point, which is true. We have placed former corrections deputies in every law enforcement agency in Whatcom County except for Washington State Patrol. And we discourage them from going to WSP because of the kind of work it is. But however, when it comes to leaving people, people leaving us to go to patrol, it's only about 13.5%. That what happens is, for all of the people saying that that's their ultimate goal, they find when they get to work in the environment, which I appreciate Raylene's comments about it, but they find that the people working there embrace them, and that's turned out to be the culture that we've developed over the years. And in fact, there are people who leave from other jails that come to ours. And so we've discovered that one of our strongest recruiting is the people who are already there, reaching out to people they know who may be interested in corrections. We also seem to be developing a next generation of our own new corrections deputies based on the ones that work there, simply because children and relatives are finding it maybe interesting. The other kind of interesting thing that we've been doing is but getting feedback from the spouses of some of the deputies who work for us who thought they wanted to go to patrol and whose spouses have told them no, because they actually perceive the jail as safer, in that we can get back up to them if there's a problem within the facility. So there are some things that we've discovered as we've been reaching out. And the last thing I want to say is that the energy that we have right now about recruitment is absolutely based with Lieutenant Erickson right now. He's been working like crazy to try and get additional people. He's reaching out to them. We realized that the newer generation of employees need a little bit more hand-holding than they used to in the old days. And Caleb does a marvelous job at that. And that seems to be helping with us getting people in the front door. We're still struggling a little bit with some of the folks who are interested had kind of creative youths, which make them not quite appropriate to come into working at the jail, at least at the point they're applying. We have encouraged some folks, give it another 3 or 4 years, and we'll see how you're doing over that period of time. And time doesn't heal all wounds, but it can help some of them scab over, and that we can then better look at having them come to work in the jail. So it was interesting to me that for all of the people who say they want to go to patrol, once we can get them in the door and get them working, that a lot of them seem to stay. And part of it is, thank you very much, Melissa. I'm not sure if I'm seeing her still here or not, but the willingness of the county to offer some additional incentives to our staff was great. Long-term, I'd like it if we can get the state to move corrections deputies into the same retirement system as other law enforcement agencies. But that's going to be beyond the ability of just the county to do that. It really needs to happen at a state level. So anyway, that's it.
Caleb?
Thank you. So it was really interesting. Again, the timing of this Nashville trip is pretty important, I think. We saw really, really great work being done by the Nashville Sheriff's Office, the Davidson County Sheriff's Office, in terms of training, recruitment, in terms of inclusivity. And it really comes down to the attitude of the leadership of the organization. It was really, really inspiring to get to spend time with Chief Wilkes, who is their Chief of Corrections. He has a very warm and accepting attitude. He said more than once that the doors swing on welcome hinges. We're family. And he spoke about how excited he was to see members of the LGBTQ plus community involved in his staff, and even folks who were making transition while on his staff. There were tremendous amounts of efforts being made to educate everyone on staff about those particular things that were burdening the communities. And he's actually included liaisons to some of the special communities in his area. I think all of that is very, very good stuff to use here as a springboard and opportunity. I would say that they spend a tremendous amount of effort, time, and money to train their staff. And I think that we could do a lot worse than to emulate that here in our neck of the woods. I want to say also that under Sheriff Elfo and under Sheriff Chadwick, we have been able to specifically designate a training sergeant who is now going to be tasked with gathering some of this momentum that we've been received from Nashville and pushing our training to new levels and our staff to new levels on the same vein. So again, very, very important work being done in Nashville, stuff that we hope to hear more from in the future.
Wow, really inspiring. Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I want to look at, what is it, B4 Rec 1, the issue having to do with diversity. I have to wonder if our success is not also contributing to our problem, in that by, how do I put it here? We're recruiting people who are similar to those who are currently successful, right? People are reaching out. And so we're maybe getting more of the same. Not that the same is bad. It sounds like we're actually finding the right people. And this is one way to find the right people, but it's also a way to maybe overlook some other people who might be right in their own way. So let's not stop doing the current things, but I don't think any of that really addresses increasing diversity or finding excellent candidates who aren't found by the current means. I think that's the whole conundrum with diversity, especially in a community like ours. So, I mean, can we go to a place with a higher minority representation in their community and go poach their best officers? Maybe we should do that.
Yeah, it reminds me of the conversation we had earlier today about how to get more mental health professionals and substance abuse disorder professionals here, like, come here. This is a wonderful place to be, and to be able to offer proper wages. And yeah, good point. We're going to need, to actually build the system up, that's what we need to figure out is how many people do we need? How much do we need to pay them? What it's going to cost? And I think that's part of the trick right now with our implementation plan is we need to start filling in the numbers of what we think that's actually going to look like. And that's why we so much are relying on all of you to start thinking that through so we can produce that. Okay, what else on this topic? And there's a bunch of people who haven't spoken yet today, and we're really, at a certain point, Marty, I think we should open up on everything we've talked about today and see
Absolutely. I was thinking exactly the same thing. But it's a free for all. Any thoughts you've been sitting on about any of the service related recommendations? And then if we have time, we could also look backward to systems.
Yeah. Thanks, Caleb.
Sorry, I wanted to point out that, like others said today, we have an exceptionally amazing correctional staff. I cannot say enough about how awesome they are. And I would say even in the last 2 years, we've seen more diverse applicants and more successful diverse applicants from many different cultural backgrounds, many more Spanish speaking applicants, but we've got people who speak Spanish and Punjabi and Urdu and Hindi. And so we've got good people in place, but I'm interested in finding out more ideas. Like Councilmember Lilliquist was talking about, maybe we try specific outreach. Maybe that's the right answer. I'm not turning away any good answers. I just want to say that we're doing a really good job. I want to continue that good work.
Thanks. Laura?
My comment is more of a general comment. Should I hold off? Okay. I just wanted to say that one of the things that keeps coming up is that because we're a smaller community, because of our geographic challenges, we have a lot of small programs. And they're doing good work. But I think what is missing is that high level of coordination across all of those programs. And I don't know if we'll ever have, what they have in Nashville, which is one agency that does everything. I just don't see that happening because of the way that our agencies work. And I'm talking about mental health and medical. But I think what we might be able to do is create those pathways for successful coordination across, whether it's a big agency like Compass or a smaller agency or an outreach group. But I think the emphasis for us is going to have to be around that coordination piece. And that might, the infrastructure that allows us to coordinate all of those different entities.
Thank you. Yeah, point well taken. Melissa? Where'd you go? Melissa, were you going to chime in? I just lost you on the screen.
You're mute, Melissa.
Apologies, thank you. Just in terms of the effort to recruit for diversity for the benefit of the group, I just wanted everyone to know that we in HR definitely acknowledge that the time of passive recruitment is gone, and we are definitely interested in getting much more engaged with the community and getting out there and taking an active role in recruitment. Just yesterday, we completed a really fun event hosted by the Cascade Radio Group with Sergeant Gegner from the jail, who came and really just hit the mark with 3 to 5 really solid potential candidates. And it's that outreach and that personal connection with people that I think is going to help us accomplish that goal. So we're committed to doing more of that.
Great. So this kind of leans to the question of who's going to help fill in the planning document. So Melissa, are you somebody we could lean into? Get some help?
Absolutely, sure, I can help with that.
Great. Anybody else willing to step forward to help with this section of the plan? The what are they here? What is it, Marty? B5, B6? Am I remembering? I didn't.
B4, B5. Yeah.
B5. Anybody else who's willing to help with that? Caleb?
Caleb, yay.
Caleb, we have really created a lot of work for you. Danelle,
I
are
thought
you?
I saw Wendy's hand go up.
Yeah, Wendy. And Danelle, I don't know if you're waiting to speak or if you're offering to help out on this section. What's your thought here?
Well, actually both, but
Okay.
I do want to talk about the training piece with regard to fair and impartial policing. And certainly I've been a trainer in fair and impartial policing for about 7 to 8 years now. And that program actually talks about the science of biases and how implicit biases can impact a person in their professional capacity, and also the consequences of bias-based decision-making. And I would like to offer that the city of Blaine, we have 2 certified trainers that the certifications are valid and they're current. And in fact, in December, we taught 3 classes at Skagit County Corrections Department. So they really enjoyed that training. So I just want to throw that out there, and it's free.
Wow, fantastic. Great resource. Thank you. Michael?
Oh, I need to start off with a disclaimer. I am not an expert on HR issues and organizational diversity, but I've been kind of paying attention and trying to learn. And as Melissa said, yeah, passive efforts for diversity, saying we don't discriminate, aren't enough. There needs to be far more active. And also, I think it's hard to describe it, but you don't go out looking for African-American candidates or Hispanic candidates or LGBTQ candidates. You go out advertising and soliciting people that match values, and those values speak to diversity, right? So you're not actually just looking for these external aspects, but you're telling people that you have a culture that clearly, is inclusive. And you know what I'm saying? It's not specifically about like a quota-based approach. It's really looking at the values underneath that support diversity and appeal to diverse candidates, which let them know diversity is a strength and we want it, rather than saying we need some more brown people, right? It doesn't work quite that way. And I'm sure Melissa understands this very well, but that's sort of what I'm learning. And I think we got to make sure when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about the values that underlie why we like diversity and advertise it that way.
Yeah, thank you. Perry?
This sort of ties in with some of what Caleb was talking about and others. I have always maintained that a process of sophisticated trainings by local experts and certainly bringing in outside trainers, that sort of thing, could very much be a vehicle for recruitment. And so, not necessarily, county-based, but reaching wider out into the state or beyond, and being known as a training, entity. And again, several folks have given examples of that I think are amazing. And it's really, I think, about taking that and marketing it out further, and affording an opportunity to connect with individuals. And then, as a side note, say, by the way, we have opportunities here, and et cetera, sort of thing. There's, dollars that are involved in that, obviously, and, and coordination that is pretty extensive, but I think it's a great way to be able to reach people. And I know that we're doing some of that. I'm just saying that we could expand further.
Thank you. Melissa?
Right. We are also building in some training elements for our existing workforce. I think being able to promote outward to our candidates that we have the culture established here at Whatcom County to already do this is only going to help our recruitment efforts. And what you saw, Caleb, in Nashville, from the leadership there, we're hoping to bring some really high quality DEI training to our leadership this spring. That's something is on my work plan to talk to the executive's office very soon. We're exploring some recent external consultants who do a really good job of delivering the message in a way that can be heard by a wide variety of audiences. And that's what I'm personally interested in, is bringing the message to folks in a way where everyone can hear it and everyone can buy into it, and finding the right trainer who is skilled in doing that is important. And I think we may have landed on some good options to deliver that training, again, to our leadership this spring, with the intention to deliver it to all staff by the end of the year.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you. Tyler?
Yeah, thanks, Holly. And kind of to Perry's point about kind of being on the forefront or the leadership of this conversation, I can say, you know, when we were in Nashville, it was clear that that's what they were looking to do. And as we start to talk about facilities, let's not forget that, you know, you need to build facilities to be able to promote those type of training opportunities. Maybe not to the level of Nashville, because I was absolutely blown away by it. But, you know, overall community, you know, law enforcement, fire, EMS, crisis, behavioral health training opportunities could be incorporated into the conversation as we move forward. When we were there, we were touring through their new facility that had a specific training wing to there, and they were working on things like correctional behavioral health certification programs, and actually becoming, you know, train the trainer opportunities. So they're not bringing in those training opportunities, they're actually training leadership in the jail staff to accomplish that. Also looking at inaugural crisis intervention training for correctional staff, and then many others. So I'm kind of expanding it also beyond the DEI conversation or the, you know, equity conversation to just what do we envision? How do we continue the great work that our current correctional staff is, and give them the opportunity, and then throughout law enforcement as well. Something to think about.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent. Doug?
Yeah, I just want to go back to what Melora said about coordination between the different organizations and the services, and we may never actually get there. I think we're definitely going in the right direction, and we saw some amazing systems and services in Nashville. And I want to just thank Caleb for kind of being the tip of the spear on that, and really moving forward and coordinate that for everybody, because I thought it was very beneficial to see that, even though we can't replicate that here in Whatcom County on a scale they did. It's certainly something that's scalable, and I think a lot of the pieces they have there, we're already doing here. So that's a testament to the good work that's been going on here in Whatcom County. But I think one of the things that really resonated with me is Sheriff Hall made the comment, where do you as a community, or where do you specifically as a agency want to intervene in somebody's life and help them to have a better life? So what we may never, you know, sometimes it's very siloed, you know, whether you're where you are in the criminal justice system or in the community outside, or even the reentry piece. I think if where you are, you look at where do I as an agency want to intervene and benefit somebody, I think that's a good starting point. And then collectively we can start piecing together those into one complete system. And I think that's what's happening. And I would just encourage people to kind of go back to that and remember that as we move forward.
Thank you. Barry?
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on what Doug said about the trip and what we learned, the inspiration and the leadership that the sheriff shows is just amazing. And there's just a common vision, common strategy throughout, you know, their whole effort, and it permeates down into their workforce so much. Their people are just all on the same page. The coordination they do across agencies is amazing. I agree. We have to find our own scale, our own version, because theirs is massive, and we could never put something together that large, but we can certainly use a lot of those ideals and principles, just as we did visions and values and goals in the SAC process. You know, that's kind of what we've been talking about and how we implement those visions, values, and goals. So I think there's a lot to be learned from our trip, and we just need to focus it into the reality of our size of a county.
Yeah, thank you. It's occurring to me that when all of you went have a meeting to talk about what you learned in Nashville, if you can maybe even upload some of that into the worksheet, that'll be helpful, because then we can start to bring those ideas for how we could improve coordination. And we've been talking about that really this whole meeting. Like, if we're going to have an integrated system for services, we need to really be thinking about how's that going to work? How is that going to be possible? And what do we need to do to have the staffing and funding to make that happen? I thought
I just want to add to what you just said, Holly. The worksheets have been a tool, and it's super helpful. But we are also open to just getting an email and those, I guess, would go through the IPRTF email, but to share ideas that way. If you don't, if you aren't comfortable working with a worksheet, that's another way. We just don't want to lose your ideas. We want to hear them all. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Scott?
Yeah, concerning all this good work that's coming out of Nashville, I guess it'd be interesting to know from the team that went there, some of the ratios. I mean, that would help us maybe to size our jail appropriately. So how many beds do they have relative to their population in their county? And then do they do, all these things in the jail, and how many beds do they have relative to their total capacity? Because I think if this place is doing it so well, we could hopefully learn from them and maybe mimic some of their good stuff.
Thanks. Barry?
And to your point, Scott, I think the team, I sent out an email just about a half hour ago to try to schedule a debrief so we can consolidate all of our, our notes and our thinking. So we are definitely trying to expedite that so we can get some of that information into our implementation plan.
Thanks. Caleb?
Just to respond to you, Mayor Courthouse, we are going to be putting together a presentation that includes what's similar and what's not the same, because there's a large component of their system that doesn't equate at all to what we're doing in our neck of the woods. So we're going to be careful about saying, well, if they have, 1,000 people in custody and we have X number of it doesn't quite equate. So we'll specifically call out the differences because it does matter in the underlying conversation. So we're already developing, I've got a full tablet worth of notes. We're developing those notes individually. We're going to come together next week, gather up more requests for information, fire that off to Nashville. They're going to send us more information. And then another component that I was rolling around in my head here is this wasn't the end of a conversation. This was the beginning of a conversation with them. They're willing to walk with us in a process to help understand across our landscape what it could look like for us and our community. So they've been very, very willing to help. So I'm looking forward to continued conversation.
Fantastic. So three things are coming to my mind. Marty, is there any other thing that you want to make sure that we talk about as we wrap up here? Is there anything that you're feeling is hanging out?
We covered a lot of great ground with those recommendations and services. So no.
So what then in kind of closing, here's my thought. I'd love to just give a chance for folks who haven't spoken to just chime in with any thoughts that you have today, because your presence is really important and your voice. And then I was kind of hoping that from our planning team, anything that you're reflecting on or the thoughts you might have about just getting us ready for our next conversation on facilities. So I think that would be helpful as we close out. So again, I'm going to ask if there's anyone who didn't get a chance to speak. Bruce, I'm glad you turned your camera on. Did you have anything that you wanted to say?
You know, I don't really have anything specific. And I'm not sure, wasn't able to attend the first, I don't know, I missed whatever, the first 45 minutes or so. But I know that both Bellingham Municipal and District Court, there are judges that are interested in forming a community court. I don't know if that was discussed or has been, but that's something that there's a lot of interest in from the court's perspective. So at some point, we'll need to have a discussion about that. But other than that, that's the only comment I have. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to just call. Go ahead, Marty.
I just was wondering if you would be a good person to gather any more information about that from. Are you available to tell more if I reach out?
Yeah, maybe I'd say, yes, reach out and I'll tell you everything I know, which is not a lot more than I just said, but I'll share whatever I know.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Jed, did you have any? And if I call on you and you don't have anything, you just say no. Jed, anything? No? Brian, anything to share?
Nah, probably nothing useful, to be really candid with you. So yeah, thanks for the discussion.
Great, thanks for being here. Deborah, any thoughts? Ms. Holly?
I'm sorry, I'm on phone. I'm not used to that. I have no thoughts. I have thoughts, but I'm not ready to share them yet. I'm still formulating them, and we'll share them at the next meeting.
Okay, great. Well, feel free to Deborah to just email them, Deborah. I just know how you just really have such great insights from working with you before. So yeah, just email them too would be fine.
Thank you.
Eric, yeah, Eric, any thought from you?
I don't have any thoughts. I other than that, we had some great discussion today. I heard, so that's it's good to hear.
Right, thanks. Who else didn't get a chance? Tommy, did you have any other thoughts you wanted to share?
No thoughts today. Thank you though.
Okay, I think we got Doug. Who else didn't get a chance to talk? I'm scanning. Nell talked. Okay, I think we got everybody then. All right, so from my planning team, anything you want to say, just reflections on what you heard today or thoughts you have on what would set us up for our next conversation? Because these are all interrelated. Barry and then Stephen.
Well, first I'll say, as usual, y'all rocked it today and really are thinking outside the box and willing and enthusiastic about presenting your thoughts. So I really appreciate that. I would say as we move forward, please fill out those worksheets if you can. I think that's been super helpful for the team to have your input and they can help formulate our discussion and tighten it up because we only have so much time in these meetings. So that would be one of the things I would request going forward, but keep bringing your ideas, keep bringing your enthusiasm. That's what's important. You know, we're a team here that's really trying to do something very important for our community. So thanks again. And I'll let Stephen go.
My observation is that I was struck that we are sort of hitting in some aspects a point that the IPRTF hit also, where we're butting up against systems that are larger than Whatcom County. One of the needs was to establish ongoing funding for a number of the programs we already have. The Medicaid waiver issue that Kayla jumped on was another one. These are not local issues. The task force tried to talk to our legislative representatives this session. It was too late in the process. And frankly, their grasp of the kinds of issues that we're confronting already head on was not particularly impressive. So it occurs to me that there might be a piece of this where we start to think of an advocacy campaign, not just legislative, but a way to affect bigger statewide systems, that's a whole separate discussion and a sort of a specialized way to move some of this forward. I don't know how to fit that in. I don't know who the participants of that would be, or what our focuses might be, but I just encourage us to think of that arena as another area that we hadn't included in our SAC process and our implementation planning that I think we would be wise to consider.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, Jack?
The only thing I'll add is very briefly, thanks to everyone for being here. And it's great to be sitting in these meetings, planning how's this going to go, and see a meeting like today where there's just a lot of great information. I would call it synergy with the different voices. I'm encouraged by some of the information and ideas that I think will come out of the recent visit to Nashville. And my experience with this is I think we're doing better than we think we're doing. Is the scope of the problem gargantuan? Absolutely. Every community that struggles with this has in some ways an insurmountable problem, but I think we really are being thoughtful and doing the best we can, and that's encouraging. And thank you again for all participating.
Thanks, Jack. Tyler, did you have any thoughts you'd like to share as we close up?
Yeah, just real quickly, as I recognize all the good conversation that happened today, and I want to reinforce what Jack just indicated, because a lot of the conversations that we had this last week were in programs that we've either developed ourselves as a community or are planning to accomplish it as well. But as we talk about services, and we 2 weeks ago or last week talked about systems, we're going to transfer into a little bit more of the probably controversial part of this conversation as it relates to facilities. And so I just really want to recognize the goodwill, the good conversation, the productive input that has been going on for many years with the task force, with the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. But also, next week we're going to be talking about facilities for the services outside of the correctional facility, outside of the jail. And I think today's conversation, I would love to have people circle back around and provide the input on what type of facilities could be accomplished with the services that we just talked about. Because as I looked at the worksheet, there hasn't been as much input on the facilities. So if we're talking about a 23-hour, holding facility or sobering center, talk about how that fits in. How does the PACT program fit into supportive housing or not? And just leverage this conversation into a facility so we can really move that forward as well. And then in 2 weeks, it'll be more of a conversation about correctional facility and behavioral health and medical associated with it. So don't be scared about the next couple of weeks conversations. I think it's going to be a really valuable and productive input on how we define that.
Yeah, thank you. That was just what we need to hear, Tyler. And I think that this is a lot we're trying to do, in the sense we're trying to get specifics on things that we've talked about for a long time. And now we have to figure out really, so what are the systems and services? Who's going to do them? And what is it going to cost? Like we have, and that is so critical and so challenging, really, because a lot of it we're going to be doing our best guess, and our best guess is going to have to be good enough. And the next conversation we have coming up about facilities with the community, as soon as you guys can look at that, and again, just what from your understanding of what was said here today and your sense of being on the ground, what does it need to look like? So that then we can start to advance that conversation, because it really is important to get as much unity as we can on what that's going to be. So I think, any other comments before we close out? Okay, we've got, we're going to keep on working on all our pieces. And remember that our next workshop is Thursday, March 23rd. We'll go back to our regular time of 9:30 to noon. and send your comments. Both if you're listening here today, thank you for being here. Your comments are welcome. And if you've been participating in anything, when you walk away going, oh, I should have said that, you can just go ahead and send an email and we'll get it. And I think that's pretty much what we've got. And so I'll turn it back to Barry to close us out.
Well, again, thanks everybody for being here and really entertaining a great discussion that we had today. So we will see you next week, next Thursday, and everybody have a great weekend and we'll catch you later.